hard-coded list right now, but we can find a way to make that dynamic if we need to. And yeah, we autocomplete where we can, for sure.
I mentioned verbs being uppercase. I don't know why I'm caught up on that, but aesthetically, I would want verbs to autocomplete to uppercase and be uppercase the whole time.
Yeah, I'm gonna make a note of that.
Also, I would be interested in what the URLs. If I typed in connect pet store swagger with mixed case, it would persist that case all the way through.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's an easy fix.
And then I'm not sure. I have mixed feelings about the tilde. How do you pronounce that?
Tilde.
The tilde. Because it's a tilde is not a thing that you see showing up in a path very often. You see either a greater than sign or a dollar sign. And are we effectively adopting the tilde and saying this is our thing now? Darn it. You know what I mean? Like that's what when you're CDing into a URL, tilde is where it's at. I'm curious if anyone feels strongly. I mean, again, we're nitpicking a lovely thing, so we don't mean to pick on you for nitpicking the nittiest of nits, but I'm curious what the audience thinks about that.
Yeah, I don't actually know, where the decision for the tilde came from. It's just been there.
Well, the thing that's great about these kind of features is that you just be intentional about it, and all you have to do is say, yes, that was the way we always meant it to be, and then we would believe you.
Exactly.
Right? Another folks are saying, what about command history? You can get up, and hit like command history like the shell?
Yep.
And what about Control R?
Let me switch back here, and so you can see the command history. I'm just hitting
Lovely. Look at
up
that.
and down.
Okay, what about Control R for reverse search like a shell? If I had like when you're in a shell and you hit Control R like in Ubuntu, it's just a reverse search of the command history.
Oh, cool. Yep, that does not currently work.
That'd be a cool thing because you might have done a whole complicated bunch of stuff. The other question is, let's say that I've got this all perfect. Can I just go and say save and dump the commands out to a text file that could then be replayed later?
Not currently. That's another good suggestion.
Good. You don't mind these suggestions, do you?
Oh, this is great. This is what we're doing. It's fantastic.
So Dan on the chat here says that the tilde normally means the home folder.
It does.
Which means that maybe having it at the end, appended at the end of a URL maybe sends a weird message as it's expressed. It's like you're reading it as URL and then home kind of floating at the end. So I wonder what awesome widget we could put at the end there that would not be a tilde.
See my tilde on my shell in Ubuntu. So yeah.
I like your power line action there. Yeah. That looks good.
Got that from your blog post.
Very nicely done, sir. Folks in the chat are supportive of my nitpicking because they say product people love nitpicking. I think this is great. So this makes me very happy.
Is there something as far as like, say I'm exploring and stuff, am I capturing, is there a way to like capture output? I don't even know what I'm asking for here, but like,
I want to type save and get everything that was input. And then I want to be able to say, he said echo on, let's say logging on, and then it would default to output.txt, and I would just get a running log of everything that I'm typing.
Yeah, right now there's no output from it, but I can see that Angelos was taking notes on that. So.
That should be easy, right? So,
yeah.
No brainer, really.
We do
have... I love it when people have ideas and you're like, oh yeah, it's easy.
I mean, I don't have to code it, right? So it's easy.
Yeah, exactly. This is already shipped, right? Like the thing that we just asked for 5 seconds ago, you've already pushed that to production?
We do have... there is a run command that allows you to run scripts of things, but you have to have handwritten those scripts to begin with.
Yeah.
So it certainly would be nice to be able to do it, get it to what you want it to be, save that script for later, and then use the run command.
I wonder if this is interactive. This is an interactive shell. Where do you see this living in a world with HTTP IE and wget and curl and things like that? Is this like, I mean, like I know that I can run HTTP IE is kind of the standard one, or HTTP, where you type the word HTTP and you can do stuff, but it's not interactive. You live in your shell and then you do a thing and then you're back in your shell. Would you ever look at this as a do something and get back out, or is this always meant to be an interactive shell? It is a REPL, right? It is not a.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the idea of a session is very powerful, and deep integration with ASP.NET is what's going to set this apart from the other tools.
Gotcha.
I think that's where we're going to try and add value rather than compete and try to create something very similar. We're going to try and differentiate by deep integration. And the idea of the session, I think, is for learning and exploring. I think that's powerful, and sharing with other team members and things like that.
So,
go ahead.
Well, as far as the integration with tools kind of stuff, how, is it something where it's always kind of focused on CLI only, and then I've been jumping back and forth because we've been troubleshooting some video stuff. But did you show already hooking in as a Visual Studio browser?
No, but I can show you all of that right now. I can show you how to get it and then how to integrate it with your favorite tools.
That'd be cool.
So this is being shipped right now as a .NET Core global tool. It means that if you have the SDK, .NET Core SDK on your machine, all you need to do is fire up the .NET Tool install command. -G makes it global, and then the name of our package is Microsoft.NET-HttpRepl. So you should be able to see my screen right now, and because I already have it installed, you can also update it at any point, but just replacing install with update, right? And then the tool will get either updated to the latest version, or it will just get reinstalled from scratch to make sure everything works great. So now that you have it on your machine, if you want to integrate it with Visual Studio, I'll show you how to do that. And there's also a way to integrate it with Visual Studio Code. Now I want to point out that this is our very first release, and this is taking advantage of an existing accessibility point in Visual Studio. This is not where we're going to end integration. This is our first step. So it's not perfect, but give us feedback as to what you want to see better and work differently. And it's on our backlog to make improvements in this integration. So I'll start off by showing you how typically you can start, you can decide which server you're going to use you're going to run your application on, and which browser you're going to fire up after the application starts. So there's an accessibility point in VS on Windows. At the end of this menu, you can click Browse With, and then any command line tool can be integrated into VS. And then as far as VS is concerned, it's going to treat it like a browser. So here I have my list of existing browsers. I can just click Add. And all I need to do now is point to the REPL. Global Tools will give you an exe on Windows, so I can just point straight to that. So I'll just go to C, Users, my home, and then net. So under your home directory, .NET is where all the global tools are going to be installed under a subfolder called Tools. So here you see I have my HttpRepl exe, the Win32. So here's the full path in case anybody missed it, and there's also a blog post we can link to that has all of these details as well with screenshots and stuff. I don't have to provide any special arguments because Visual Studio by default will give the starting URL to the command line. So by doing this, close this dialog, you will see here my my web browser option now has a new entry called .NET-REPL. And now all I have to do is fire it up, and Visual Studio will start the web server, and then it's going to call my command line. It's going to fire up HttpRepl. The base URL for the project will be passed in by default. And then the connect command is going to go and discover the Swagger endpoint, and should be good to go. Give it a sec. My machine is running a lot of virus scanning.
And that same idea is how you would add that to the tab in the new terminal, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is just a shell that you're going to shell out to, and it's totally up to you. You just need to pass in the right stuff, and it will do the right thing.
Right.
Yeah. So that's how you would do it in VS. If I stop this now, I'll show you how to do the same thing in VS Code.
So that's great if you're building an API project. Like running the project isn't useful anyways. You're just going to get like you're just going to get a controller or nothing. And this is much better. I hit F5 and I can interact with.
And this is just I don't know if anybody's going to find this useful, but you might as well know about it. If you go on the select web browsers menu entry, you can actually have multiple start up. So if you really wanted the browser, because you want to use, Swagger UI to explore it, but you also want the command line, it's not a or. You can have both if you really wanted to.
That's great.
It will say you're going to launch multiple browsers now. Yeah. All right. So back to VS Code. It's the same project, but in VS Code we do debugging configurations. So all you have to do is come up and add a new configuration. And the type is going to be launching a .NET Core console app, because that's what the global tool is. I'm going to give it an easy name called HttpRepl. This I'm going to delete, and I'm going to explain why in a minute. But yeah, if you want to build before you run it, that's perfectly fine. The program we're going to run is .NET, because what I want to do here is I don't want to use the exe, because that's platform specific. I want to show you how to do it in a platform agnostic way. So here we're going to be executing .NET that is available on all platforms. And then we're going to tell it, well, I actually want HttpRepl. It's the first argument that's going to be passed in. And then the second argument is going to be my starting URL. And I think the port is 52080. Now, and I also want to make sure I use the integrated terminal here. So then the command window will open within VS Code on the bottom. So now that I have my configuration saved, this will just launch the tool, but it won't launch my web browser, my web server, sorry, at the same time. So VS Code has what is called compound configurations. So if you go to the top and you say add compounds, this way you can tell VS Code to execute more than one debugging configuration at the same time. And that's why I removed the pre-built step. Because what I'm going to tell it to do now is first launch the configuration for the web server, which is what VS Code gives me by default. And then after that, please follow it with HttpRepl. So if I save this now, then I should be able to select my compound configuration. Well, let me rename that to debug with HttpRepl. And then we can launch that. Give it some time. There we go. Oops. Clicked one too many times. So now we have the integrated terminal showing us the output from HttpRepl, just like before. And if we stop debugging, everything goes away. So it's all nice, encapsulated nicely.
And that's launch setting for the application itself. So I can configure that specific to, like if I'm building an API project, I can just build that in for the launch configuration there.
Yeah, and we're looking into finding better ways of letting you define that you want to use HttpRepl for your project. A few ideas have been flying around, like maybe launch settings.json. We are definitely looking into it. Please tell us what the ideal way would be. It's on our backlog. We want to make improvements here, so we have bandwidth. We're ready to go.
Cool. So have we gone through all the features?
Yeah, for the first release.
Okay.
I did real quick. Just wanted to show, since Scott mentioned it, I hooked up Windows Terminal to load up HttpRepl, connecting to that pet store endpoint that I showed earlier. So just as you mentioned, that will work. It's pretty easy to do in the
And what's so nice about that is you can have the Azure Cloud Shell as a tab. You can have the HttpRepl as a tab. I mean, whatever you want to do, whatever makes you happy.
Exactly.
So did you guys show the repo? Like we've been saying, hey, if you have ideas or whatever, I mean, obviously they can tell us on the current stream and stuff, but people should be logging issues on the HttpRepl GitHub project, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna pull
Where is
up.
it? It's under github.com.
And it recently moved, right? Moved
Yeah.
from the lab to.
It's moved. It's It's moved like 4 times in the last year, I think. As of about 3 weeks ago, it's on .NET now.
It's on .NET now?
Yeah.
And I don't think this browser has my credentials, so let me...
Yeah, it was on ASP.NET/HttpRepl, and we just got it moved to .NET HttpRepl, which broke all my integrations with all the build servers and everything, and so that was fun.
Is there a reason for it to be .NET REPL instead of ASP.NET REPL?
Consolidation things.
Okay.
I think there's going to be some more.
You see me struggle with my answers.
Yeah, I think there's going to be more about that consolidation, but we're just, since we hadn't actually had an official release, we just went ahead and did that move now before we had the first official release.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, we got some open issues there. We've been fixing things as people have been bringing them to us. We've accepted a couple of PRs from the community already, so that's been nice. So yeah, we'd love to get more in there, whatever anybody has.
Very cool.
Yeah.
As part of, like, you're here from the Web Tools team, so I didn't want to totally change the subject if we want to go more into HTTP REPL, but I also did want to ask if there's more stuff Web Tools wise, because we haven't really dug into Web Tools for a while. Is there more stuff that we should be aware of that you folks are working on?
Yeah, definitely. I can talk a bit about some of the other work my team is doing, which is around publishing from Visual Studio on Windows.
Cool.
And specifically around getting Visual Studio to understand your application dependencies. So what I have here is I've started the publish process for Visual Studio, and I've told it to go and find an existing app service. On my subscription, it's found a bunch, and I pick an existing one called web application, blah, blah, blah. I click OK, and that's going to go and hit the Azure endpoint and try and read some information from it. You get all the kind of stuff you expect, like what resource group is it created in, what kind of target framework and all that kind of stuff. But what's new for us and what we're working on is this new dependency section at the bottom. The idea here is that publish can succeed and your application cannot run at all, right? If your application depends on the database, publish can think, oh yeah, I've put all the files up there and everything is great. But when the application starts to run, you might think to yourself, oh, startup error. I don't know what's going on. Maybe the application is broken, publish failed, something didn't work correctly. Well, all that happened was that we kind of gave you a false sense of security. We kind of told you it's all great, all green, and you are anticipating a working startup page. What we're not really doing is we're not checking that your application is ready to be run. We're checking that all of the things that we're supposed to put there are there. We now want to go to the extra step and say, well, what does this application need to actually run successfully? Not just what does it need to be a successful deployment. And what we quickly realized is we need to be aware of what your application depends on. Because otherwise, we're just not going to be able to give you enough information about whether it's going to start. Now, we know that even the most basic of working applications needs some type of data store. So we started this journey there. We started by trying to understand dependencies against Azure Storage and SQL Server, because we're hoping that's going to get us to exercise the whole framework, the whole thinking. And the plan is to always add as many dependencies as we can. So expect being able to have a dependency against a microservice on a Swagger API to be a dependency we can understand and do something about. Maybe if you're using Key Vault to manage your secrets, we should be able to understand that and help you transfer your secrets from your secrets XML or JSON file to your Key Vault when you're publishing, things like that. But this is the first step to the journey, and we want to get as much vigor as possible because we don't want to create something that is proprietary here. We don't want to create something that you have to use this tool to get this benefit, even though you've already done the task, now you have to redo the task with this tool. Because the classic problem we have is you work on some code, you're adding dependencies, you're adding NuGet packages, you're writing the code, and then the tool says, well, I know nothing about this code base. Can you tell me what dependencies it has? That's the most annoying thing in the world, right? Having to retell it exactly what you just did. So we're trying to come up with strategies that let us take all the pain away of you having to tell us what the code needs and us trying to understand it. So we have some fuzzy logic around that. We have some user input that verifies it. But the end goal is to come up with an environment and the list of dependencies. So then we can help you publish that application anywhere successfully. Now, starting with app service, if we go back to my messaging, thank you. We click the add button. We currently support 3 Azure services: Azure SignalR, Azure SQL Database, and Azure Storage. And if you add any of them, let's say we add a new storage account, we are both provisioning or letting you pick an existing instance, but we're also creating a dependency between the app service and this dependent service that you're creating. I'm gonna pick a random one here, it doesn't really matter. Now, this is the first step where we wanna get better. Now here I have to retype the connection string name that this application uses for this connection. We're working on being able to automatically detect the connection strings the application is already using and making this a simple dropdown. So let's say this
So based on when I run my app, it's just going to say, oh, you connected here, and it's going to...
Exactly. This will be my marketing database or my operations database that I'm connected to. Now, when we're adding this dependency, we want to remember that you need this dependency, even if you go and you publish this application somewhere else, even if it's in 2 months' time, even if it is a completely different environment, maybe you go from Windows to Linux, doesn't matter, the application still needs these dependencies. We're starting off by persisting this dependency on Azure App Service as a tag. So any service in Azure has a key value pair that can be used to add metadata to it. So we're taking advantage of that ability to tag it to know that this has a dependency. Now, the idea being that if in the future I publish an application again, it will automatically remember this dependency for me. Now, the hope in the future is that if I come here and I say, oh, I want a new published profile, because now I want to push this application, let's say, to Linux, the previous published profile and all of its information should feed into the next one, so that you just have a list of things to go through, check, and provision, and then you're finally able to publish. We're not quite there yet because we have this problem to solve. If I go back to connected services, all I did was I double-clicked on the connected services node here in Solution Explorer. We have some nice tooling here that lets you add capabilities to your application. Classic example here is adding Key Vault or adding cloud storage. And it's a very convenient way to get the right NuGet packages. So let me just show you how that works. Very similar to the previous screen that you saw. You can pick an Azure storage and tell it what connection this is. This is my marketing DB, and I'm going to add it. This will install the right NuGet packages, and then I should be ready to write my code to consume it. There was one question we didn't ask during this experience. What are you using? Oh, sorry, this is where my connection string is going to end up in my secrets file. So there was only one question we didn't ask during this, which was, what are you adding this dependency for? Is this supposed to be used even when you F5 your application locally? Or are you trying to prepare your code for when you put it in production and you want to use Azure Storage? Because maybe you want to use the Azure Storage emulator locally. The difficult question that was omitted during this experience was, for what environment do you want this dependency for? But because Visual Studio doesn't really have the idea of environments yet, that question is omitted, and then we kind of have to guess. So what we're trying to do right now is figure out a way to bring the idea of environments into Visual Studio without creating something proprietary. So think of having to persist this list of dependencies, but in a way that it's not proprietary to Visual Studio, that I can go work in Visual Studio Code, I can add a bunch of dependencies through the code, and if I bring it back into VS, it just lights up. It's not some extra step that you have to do. There's many ideas being thrown around, which is, for example, we could just take advantage of Docker files, save all the metadata in a Docker file, even if we don't use a Docker image. That's still a standard that everybody understands, other tools can use. A repo that already has Docker in it, you can immediately read it. We could come up with our own proprietary file format that gives us more flexibility, but then the community has a harder time integrating with it. And it would be, I've tried to ask this question before in MVP summits and other forums, but I would love to get feedback again. What ideally would the community like to see here? How would you like Visual Studio to start persisting this metadata about your environment so that you're not locked in, but you also feel like there's great value there and you can take advantage of it and do something that you maybe couldn't do before in such a short amount of time. The overall goal here is to help you provision, publish, and have the application run successfully. It's that last step that currently we're trying to close, that last gap. Because we can know from Azure and MS Deploy and other deployment frameworks if something was successful, but then we need to know if the application will run as well. If people see this as helpful and useful, we'd love to hear the feedback. If people think that no, this should be left up to CI/CD and publish should be super simple and you shouldn't worry about dependencies, we want to hear that feedback too. I know there's two different camps on here. I've done user studies, I've done surveys, and I know it's kind of like split 50-50. But still, good ideas come from this discussion, so I just want to get the ideas going. So what I just showed is available in 16.2 and 16.3. 16.2 added Signal R, and we're hoping to add Key Vault fairly soon.
Cool. Yeah, I've been running into that some lately. You know, just the whole kind of, like, I do love that I can manage secrets and that it's something that is being thought of, like in ASP.NET Core. There's, and we talked about before, user secrets is really great. But then kind of how I work with that across multiple environments does get complicated. So
right. So so let's say you provision Key Vault and you add support for it. Do you want to use it for F5? Maybe not.
Right. A question on the chat, if we considered using MS build properties for configuring.
Yes. We don't know how extensible that is and how truly cross-platform that is. We're definitely looking into it. There's also an open source project called Como that Microsoft is working on. We consider that too. I guess my question is, why would you like it to be MS build properties? Why do you see that as being a good solution? Maybe you have an idea that we haven't thought of, because everything tends to have trade-offs. Basically the main argument against that is there's not much tooling out there that will be able to use it, and nobody else would want to produce it. We would be the only ones that would want to produce that kind of data, right? Whereas with the idea of a Docker file, then anybody that wants to eventually use Docker can find value in that. It's kind of not like throwaway in a sense.
I guess I would, you showed some of that stuff of like discovering what I'm using, what resources I'm using and stuff. So like intelligent generating that Docker file for me would be nice too. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, so the feedback here is that the project already has project configuration. So that starts release and development and debug. So that's a good point. You do get that for free. Here's where I'm gonna make this problem even harder for people. So the funny thing is we keep saying, oh, I'm gonna work on my local F5, and then somebody says, well, what if I'm F5ing into Azure Dev Spaces? What if I'm F5ing into a virtual machine? That's not local anymore. So there is a bit of a vocabulary limitation here too. What we really mean is the F5 environment, whatever you want to call that, your F5 loop, and then your non-F5 environments. So yes, you have the idea of debug versus release in MS Build, but there's a metrics here of what project configuration you want in which environment. So it's not just a matter of just adding more configurations. It's about mapping them to something. Makes sense.
All right. Is there anything else you guys want to show off or talk about?
I think that covers it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
So thanks a lot. This has been great, and I do want to regularly check back in with you as you're releasing new features. It was cool seeing the blog posts on HttpRepl, and I reach out to Tim, but in the future, as you're working on new things, we'd love to keep bringing it to the community.
Sounds good.
Cool.
I did see somebody asked about auth on there. I swear that's the most common question that we get. And yes, we do have plans. We'd love to, hear more feedback on what auth scenarios you think should be supported in there. We got some people that even requested the, I don't even know the right name for it, but the scenario where it'll pop up the web browser for you to log in with it, which obviously wouldn't work in a scripted environment with a run command or anything, but it could work in the more interactive way. But definitely want to hear the feedback on what's the scenarios that people see auth being useful for in this.
Yeah, it could tell you like go to this URL and enter this code to authenticate, right? Rather than But that's definitely an approach. Yeah, we definitely have plans for authentication. You're gonna see progress there.
And as a reminder for folks, if they are wanting to keep a close eye on this, you can always just watch that repo, right? You can watch for releases or watch. So that's a good way to.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. All right. Well, I think we can wrap up there. Sorry for folks watching. Sorry, there was some hiccups with the YouTube. We'll make sure that we get the right video posted on YouTube for watching later. And great that Twitch was working well. So, cool. All right. Well, thanks a lot. And I think one of those buttons wraps up the show.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Take care.